So, for our next session, we have Dr. Aloysius Albert S., who is an assistant professor of English and dean of students at St. Xavier's College, Palamkoti. And to his credit, he has BA in philosophy, theology, sociology, and English, MA in English and theology, and an MPhil in English, as well as he has completed his PhD. He has also done a certificate course in German language at the MK University. He formerly served as the HOD of English at Arul Ananda College, Madurai, and has nearly 8 years of teaching experience. He has published more than 32 research articles in the national and international journals, edited 6 books, and organized 3 national seminars. He is specialized in African language and interested in exploring ancient wisdom and its relevance to the modern world. He is well versed in Tamil, English, Hindi, Bhojpuri, Latin, and German languages. We are very excited to have you among us, sir. The platform is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Respected and learned professors from various universities and colleges across the globe, dear friends and scholars, I'm very happy to listen to some of the scholarly speech. Okay. And I hope I'm the last one for these 3 days of international workshop or international webinar. And I'm happy to listen to the topics like education, topics like digital learning, newspapers, and very happy to see you all. So my presentations today, the last topic, I just to share with you my screen, just report whether it's not visible. Yes, is my screen visible?
Yes,
is my
sir.
screen?
Please.
Yeah, yes. Okay, thank you. So I'll be talking maybe in just 30 minutes. It's already we are late. Okay. Fixity and fluidity in identity. Okay. Browsing identity in contemporary Indian diasporic literature. We have been hearing a lot about this. Okay. Identity, word identity. Also contemporary literature. But I have taken Indian diasporic literature in contemporary context, and I browse through the identity. What is the meaning of identity? And what is that identity crisis they are talking about? And the thirdly, identity in Indian diaspora. So what's the concept they are portrayed in some of the writings? So I have taken some examples. So this will be objectives of this, maybe half an hour talk. Let me directly go into the topic. Is identity fixed or fluid? So very many times we have been asking questions like this. Is my identity fixed? I am a man, I am an African, I am an Indian. Or is it gender based, ethnic based? Okay. Is it fixed? Or is it something that's called fluid? Okay. It keeps changing. What is my identity? Okay. So every time we explore, and we say, oh, is it fixed or fluid? So many people come with different answers. Okay. So we keep on asking ourselves, is the identity, okay, is one's identity fixed or fluid? Okay. So the question keeps on coming to us. When you're talking about literature, so literature mirrors the fascination with the mystery of one's identity. Okay. Who am I? What am I doing? And where am I going? Okay. So these questions appear, reappear, and disappear. So what happens in contemporary writings, they project human quests. Okay, quest for identity. Each one has got a quest for identity to know who am I, what am I, and where am I. Okay. Therefore, this identity against the background of a fissured and confusing world. So the world we are living in is actually something fissured, right? So we have lived a life that's something like fractured, and we also fissured future, a confusing world where the need for self-definition grows very urgent. And therefore, we can ask, who am I? What am I? Where am I? We keep on asking questions. So the literature does the same. Okay? Expressions of finding one's identity. Okay. I just quote, okay, H.P. Helfand observes in the American City novel, says it's a continuous and curious pursuit, curious search. So in a world that exhibits instability as a norm and a social fluidity as an ideal. Okay, refer the terms that he uses. Okay, we are living in a world that is unstable, and as a norm, it just forms. Also, there is a social fluidity as an ideal, and that is the reason we don't have any clear-cut self-image. Okay, and search for identity in modern literature takes on the form of a pursuit, search. It's a curious search, a continuous search, because the object is often undefined and unvisualized. Okay. So therefore, we keep on searching, we keep on asking ourselves, who am I, what am I, and where am I? Okay. So therefore, we begin to construct our identity. Okay. Only when we perceive the difference. Okay. Sometimes it is eroded or diluted. Therefore, a pure, essential identity, does it exist? Or do we begin to construct an identity only when the process of erosion has begun? So pure identity has already been adulterated in some or the other way in the process. Okay. And therefore, there are some people who traditionally they say, oh, identity is fixed. Okay. Traditional way of saying it. That's what I've been, down the centuries, there are so many persons who have said, oh, identity is fixed. How identity is fixed? Identity is a singular, biographically fixed, where within an individual, therefore, no changes across the context. Okay. So you are a man, I am a woman, and therefore this fixed identity is a biographically fixed, therefore nobody can change it. Okay. Whereas fluid, there's a lifespan approach. Okay. They come and say, no, identity is developed across the life course. Okay. We develop our identity across the life course. There's a different stages of life, you develop it. Okay. It's nothing, no, it's not something fixed. Even one step further, sociological, ecological model also goes to say, environment determines identity. So because we are situated in a particular place, a particular time period, therefore we are tied to a single social identity. We are tied to a single social identity. So we are in a particular place, we are in a particular time, therefore we are actually in a same place. But whereas there are some movement which believes that yes, it's not fixed, even it is social identity. This identities shift across context. It's not something fixed. It shifts across context. Therefore, it is fluid and it is not a single identity. It's a multiple identity. Okay? And multiple identity comes because of the context and because of the social group that determines one's identity. Yes. Okay. Our social group determines our identity. Therefore, this identity is fluid. You may have your particular identity. You come into a particular social group, and that social group determines your identity. Therefore, it is context based. Okay. This is second time. There are some who come in between. Okay, it says yes, identity is fixed. Yes, somebody says identity is fixed, but they have a little bit of lenient way of saying that identity development is the outcome of complex social and psychological negotiations. I underline the word negotiations. Negotiations between self and social context. Okay, so this is called ecological approach. They say its identity is fixed, but this fixed identity is having a negotiation between the self and the social context. Okay? But identity is fixed. So some kind of compromise. But whereas identity is shaped by interactions between one's changing environment and one's changing self. Okay. So identity is shaped by interactions between one's changing environment, also changing self. So this is identity is fluid. So now the question is whether identity is fixed or fluid. Okay. Let's see what philosophers and others say about this identity. So identity basically is multidimensional. Okay. It's because the social isolation, economic deprivation, political marginalizations, psychological repression, and cultural subjugation can change one's identity. And because these aspects change identity, identity is a multidimensional. Suppose to take example in psychology and sociology. So identity is a person's conception, okay, number one, and number two, it's an expression, okay, of one's individuality and group affiliations. So we have national identity, cultural identity. So we have, sociologically we define. Therefore, identity may be defined as the distinctive characteristics belonging to any individual or shared by all members of a particular social category or group. Okay. So when you define like this, what the other members or philosophers speak about this. So the formation of one's identity occurs through one's identification with significant others. Okay. Now, primarily with parents and other individuals during one's biographical experiences, also with the groups as they are perceived. So Rene Descartes, according to him, identity is I think, therefore I am. It's a big term. I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I exist. This is my identity. If I don't think, okay. So Martin Heidegger, okay, an existential philosopher, he says, being in the world or being of the world. Okay. So and that makes my identity. Okay. Paul Ricoeur, another great philosopher, who says, there is two kinds of identity. That's called ipse identity. That means selfhood. Who am I? Okay, who am I? That's selfhood. There's also called idem identity. That's called sameness. Okay, so I find the sameness in others. Okay, sameness. Two kinds of identity. Also, you find some other persons like Michael Hawke and Dominic Abrams. They define identity as people's concepts of who they are and what sort of people they are and how they relate to others. That defines the identity. Okay, what a beautiful, way of saying people's concepts of who they are and what sort of people they are and how they relate to others. So all these concepts bring together an identity. Franz Deng, okay, he defines on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, language, and culture. Okay, so we have kinds of what makes an identity possible. This is called attributes. We call it, right. We have ethnicity based on gender, ethnicity. So we can also create an identity. And Richard Jenkins, identity refers to the way in which individuals and collectivities are distinguished in their social relations. So most of the time you find this one's identity is in relation to the other social relations. Okay, individuals at the same time collectiveness makes one's identity. Therefore, many of the define, even Michael Foucault defines identity as fluid, not fixed. Okay, it's just because of these social relations, individuals and collectivities. And Jean-Paul Sartre says, man is a vast emptiness, which he carries within him as a snail carries its shell. Vast emptiness. Okay. Therefore, how do you feel that? Okay, emptiness. Okay, you can't say that, I am so and so. So that every time when you come across with the different cultural backgrounds and experiences, so it says that's a change, fluidity takes place. Okay, so wonderful way of. At the same time, even psychology speaks about an individual sense of identity is neither completely conscious nor unconscious. Okay, so though at times it appears to be exclusively one or the other. Sometimes we say, my identity, I'm conscious of myself. Sometimes I'm not conscious, but it depends exclusively one or the other. Okay. At some places, identity is referred as conscious sense of individual's uniqueness. Okay. When if I ask you, who are you? Okay. What is your uniqueness? Okay. So what uniqueness you can say that? Okay. But there are other times trying for continuity of experience. You started relating to the other experiences, or the places a sense of solidarity with the group's ideal. That makes conscious and unconscious way of saying about an identity. Okay. The second part of my presentation is as we talked about identity as the fixed or fluid, and mostly people just say a fluid identity. And what happens in this identity? Okay, there's a crisis takes place, and most of this, the writings, literature, whether it's a contemporary, ancient, everything talks about this crisis. Okay, and the crisis, identity crisis, was actually defined by Erikson, and he believed that it was one of the most important conflicts people face in the development, stages of development, the conflict. According to him, the psychological state or condition of disorientation or a role confusion occurring especially in adolescent as a result of conflicting internal and external experience, pressures and expectations, often producing an acute anxiety. Okay. And therefore, it is an analogous state of confusion occurring in a social structure, such as an institution or corporation, that gives an identity crisis. Okay. So, identity in a contemporary Indian diasporic literature. Okay, in the third part. Okay, I cannot able to tell just give you all the writers. I have taken some examples to show to you this identity, how it has been portrayed, and the crisis, how it has been depicted in this some of the writings of Indian diasporic literature. Okay, we're talking about diasporic literature. It is actually, it depicts the theme of displacement, dislocation, or cultural denigration, which leads to erosion of identity. So displacement as immigrants, possibly, a sense of consciousness about their oppressed conditions, a sense of alienation, a sense of cultural exclusion, paves a way to search for an alternative identity or seek for the original identity. Okay, so you have an alternate original identity. As an immigrant, you also want to have an alternate identity. Okay, and therefore there's a displacement, dislocation takes place, and cultural, between two cultures, and the identity struggles to establish. Okay. So this diasporic writers, they talk about exile, crisis, alienation, cultural conflicts, sense of rejection by the host community, nostalgia, and longing to be belong to somewhere. I want to belong to somewhere, and what is my identity? Okay. So the whole of Indian diasporic literature, they seek for an identity which is alternative identity, and in conflict with the original identity. Some of the examples you find: Salman Rushdie, V.S. Naipaul, Rohinton Mistry, Bharati Mukherjee, Amitav Ghosh, Jhumpa Lahiri, Anita Desai, or Kiran Desai, and so on. I'll take some of the examples. The first one, Kamala Markandeya. Okay, very early writing. The early migrant writers, one of the early migrant writer, her novel Nowhere Man, deals with the identity of a male protagonist, Srinivas, who migrates to England to escape the wrath of the British government, as his father happens to be a freedom fighter of colonial India, who forces his son to go to England for his safety. So he doesn't want his son to fight here, but he wants to safeguard his son. He asks him to go to England. Now, what happens there? The racist bias of the white, or the identity crisis in Srinivas puts him in a situations of a nowhere man. Okay? He is nowhere because his father sent him to England. And Markandeya portrays the unhomeliness, or fissured identity in your male protagonist who is unwelcome in an alien society. Okay? So this is the struggle or the crisis that Srinivas face. Okay, that's clearly portrayed by this writer. Second one is Anita Desai. Anita Desai's famous novel Bye Bye Blackbird brings out the fluidity of identity through the character called Dev or Adit. Dev's longing for living with a variety in England seems to be unsatisfied. He says everyone is a stranger and lives in hiding. Okay, look at the words that he uses. Or even the protagonist Adit, an Indian who considered England as a land of opportunities, turns at the end to leave England and wants to settle down in India. So that is original identity. At the same time, alternate identity, he finds a dual identity. Okay, so it also deals with the post-colonial diasporic migration of the younger generations. Okay, so younger generations in want of job opportunities go outside, and what happens? They really struggle and then come back. Okay. Even other novels of Anita Desai, Custody, Clear Light of the Day, the most celebrated novels, Anita Desai reveals, okay, the perennial quest for identity. It puts at the stake under the chafing pressures of the cultural forces. Okay? And therefore, relocation is necessary in order to solve this crisis. Even Salman Rushdie, okay, one of the famous novels of Salman Rushdie, knows Midnight Children, okay, and even Shame. Both these novels are interweaved around the notion of identity crisis, which owes its birth and life to the direct collision between individual and history. Okay? Therefore, the success of these novels firmly established the prominence of identity crisis in the thematic setup of the Indian English fiction. Or even Amitav Ghosh. Amitav Ghosh Shadow Lines is another masterpiece. Okay? So it also explores the identity of the protagonist against the backdrop of the Indian culture and heritage. Okay? And I always love a book called Fixed Borders and Fluid Boundaries. Okay, it's written in context of Northeast, okay, Northeastern states. Fixed borders and fluid boundaries. Okay, that actually gives an explanation to Amitav Ghosh's novels on identity. Even Bharati Mukherjee, many research scholars have explored Bharati Mukherjee's concept of identity crisis. Okay, the novel will take Jasmine. Okay. Of course, I just quote the lines from Tangamuthu. He says, okay, the novel Jasmine explores the female identity through a story of Jasmine, who shifts from Punjab to Florida, to New York to Iowa, or finally tries to settle down in California. With each move, the protagonist reinvents herself with a new name, Jodi, Jasmine, Jace, Jane, and what is her identity, which highlights her rootless position and search for identity. Okay? So when Jasmine fell in the floor, her sister remarked, "Now your face is scarred for life. How will the family ever find a husband?" Okay? So therefore, Jasmine uproots from her original identity as an Indian and reroutes herself in search of a new identity. And there is a conflict, and conflicted identity is there already. Okay? And she moves from submissive or passive identity, okay, to a strong-willed and expressive identity. So this kind of identity crisis, and she moves away from this. So the novelist mixes her identity as a colonial Indian, post-colonial Indian in Canada, an immigrant in United States. Okay. So this is the diasporic understanding of this identity crisis. Even V.S. Naipaul, okay, the mystic master, a person called Ganesh Ramsmere, okay, he switches his role to role, from identity to identity, and finally he changes his name from Ganesh Ramsmere to G. Ramsay Muir. Okay, so he wants to portray his identity, very ordinary person, but he wants to place his identity differently. Okay, and Jhumpa Lahiri, of course, he knows. Okay, it talks about cultural assimilation. Okay, in the land of adoption or a birth. Okay, also you find in her novels hybrid identity. Okay, novel Namesake or Once in a Lifetime we find. So the ethnic identity is shaped by a childhood, and also youthful identity is formed by American experience. Therefore, she calls this as hybrid identity. Okay. Therefore, identity is a flux inclined towards the land of living. So always they want to have an identity based on the original identity. And as a conclusion, everyone has to adopt and adapt themselves to match the situation around them. You and me, okay? You have to adopt. Okay? Whether in Indonesia, whether in Portugal, or we need to adapt ourselves to a particular situations that surrounds us. Okay? So the colleague at my college know different me than my wife meets at home. Yes. Okay. So identity, as it has many forms, you take personal, cultural, linguistic, religious, political, social, and psychological, many forms, is constructed via difference rather than sameness. So, for example, on the Indian subcontinent, Okay, Pakistan has constructed a national identity that highlights it's different from India. Okay, while the Tamils in south or the Bengalis in north, okay, may define themselves through their differences from other ethnic groups that live within the geographical boundaries of their multifarious country. Same country, but then we have different identity. Okay. Therefore, deconstruction of identity due to dislocation simultaneously construct personal and cultural identity. Okay. The moment you started deconstructing identity due to the dislocation, and we construct our own personal identity, also a cultural identity. Thus, Indian diasporic writers revealed in their work the fixity and fluidity of okay, the faced by the characters within and without. Okay. So Indian diasporic, okay, like we have, we call African identity. What do you call an African identity? Okay, the checkered history of slavery or land colonialism has not put a stamp of inferiority on the blacks, but has also made the West Indian lose confidence in himself. It has made him regard himself as a half human, a failure, and therefore the definitions of the ideal Caribbean identity comes based on this. Okay. Or you take American identity. Okay. And Lewis, a prominent literary critic, he described this cultural hero in his book, The American Adam. He says, an individual emancipated from history. Look at the way that he narrates a human person's identity. Happily bereft of ancestry, untouched, undefiled by the usual inheritance of family and race, an individual standing alone, self-reliant and self-propelling. Okay, so like Mark Twain, William Faulkner, Henry James, all these. Okay, finishing with Tennessee Williams. Okay, they portray American identity as something which stands alone. Okay, self-reliant and self-propelling. So you take any identity that matters, Indonesian identity. For each one has own identity. Therefore, it looks like it is something not so fixed, and it is fluid identity, and that's what we see in this context of Indian diasporic writings. Okay. And I finished. Thank you so much. Yes, I hope I've talked something.
Dr. Aloysius Albert.
Sir, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Ganesan here from Malaysia.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much for your session. It's really interesting regarding identity, fixed fluidity identity, browsing identity. It's a very wide topic actually. In fact, identity,
Yeah, yes.
especially
Yes.
for Indian diaspora, like
Yeah.
we in Malaysia. And
Yeah.
when I saw the slides and everything, actually my PhD supervisor, Dr.
Yeah.
Anbalagan, his PhD thesis was on Indian identity in Malaysia, construction of Indian identity in Malaysia. But
Wow,
the
super.
thesis was written in Malay language,
Wow.
and his thesis already published in book form in Malay language.
Okay.
And later you can share your, contact. I can actually he already written an article on the quest for Indian identity in Malaysia in English, and already published in a Scopus journal in Malaysia in English language.
Wow. Super, super.
I can forward it to you because
Yeah, sure, 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 sir.
it's a very wide topic. How we
Yes.
want to actually preserve our identity. In fact, doesn't matter whatever race, Indian or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
Identity is very important for a community, for a race, and so on.
Yes.
Who am I? How am I going to preserve? How
Yes.
am I going to value this identity? Like we in Malaysia, of course, all Indians in Malaysia, our forefathers are from India, especially from
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu. Okay, Tamilians, So
Yes.
when we came here and we are trying in and out to preserve our identity, actually, in fact, and from a labor class, when we came here as workers, my grandfather, my great grandfather, all from India, came here as laborers from a labor class identity,
Yes.
developed until to this extent that until where the Indians in Malaysia already achieved a lot, like you can see a lot of professors and so on. So the
Yes.
starting is actually as laborers, workers, when
Yeah.
we came during the British period. Okay, end of 19th century, end of 20th century, early of 20th century. Now it's 21st century. So we already developed, as you said, identity fluid. change. Of course, I mean, we are not changing, but
Yes.
we are still preserving the identity, but we are not in the same class actually, like Indians in Malaya from labor class. So we already changed to become a businessman, academicians, professors, and many enter politics and so on. So we have to change according to what's happening in the world in the future. But whatever it is, the heritage value, diaspora value, must be preserved forever. Culture, language, and so on. It's very important actually for any community in the world. In fact, for any community, without regardless of race or what. So I was very enjoying your slides actually. And
Thank you,
also
sir.
the Erikson theory,
Yes.
identity versus this one in psychological theory. That is a very
Yes.
good theory. Although Sigmund Freud come up with Jean Piaget with 4 stages of development, Erik Erikson come up with 8 stages of development. One is
Oh,
identity
yes.
versus
Yes.
I forgot already Erik Erikson theory. So that theory is applicable actually in
Yes.
our identity value. Most important, we have to preserve our identity. Like
Yeah.
Indian identity, wherever we go, this is Indian origin. Yeah, in Malaysia, we are Indian. We are originated from race, the ethnic, the clan,
Yes.
and the ethnic sub-ethnic group. It's very important. And especially for Tamilians, we need to preserve our Tamil cultural value. In fact,
And that's why the fight is going on to
yeah,
preserve
yeah,
that
yeah. Sure,
identity.
sure, sure. Seriously, seriously.
Yes.
Doesn't matter.
Everywhere they want to keep up that identity. Yes.
Yeah, to preserve where we have
Yes.
to talk our
Yes.
mother tongue.
Yes.
We have to talk. Some
Talk.
people are
Yes.
shy to talk. Okay,
Yeah.
of
Yes.
course we are all English educated. English is a must. But
Yes.
besides that, we must talk our own language, mother tongue.
Yes.
Doesn't matter whatever race they are. The mother tongue comes important factor to
Yeah.
preserve the identity. In fact,
Yes.
the identity is from the language. In fact, okay, can be from the language.
Yeah. Of
This
course,
is
you can be
my
able to study that. Yes.
uh,
It's
uh, this
from the
my
point of language.
yes, yes. It's from the language. The language will show the identity of the people, the community. Yeah. In Malay language, there is a proverb also. Bahasa jiwa bangsa, meaning that the
Yes.
language determine the race. Actually, bahasa jiwa is in our heart.
Language determines.
Language
Yes.
is very important.
Yes.
In Malay proverb is there already. Yeah, in Malaysia.
Yes.
Bahasa jiwa bangsa. You can read one Malay word now.
Yes.
Bahasa
Yes.
is language,
Yes.
bangsa is race. Okay,
Yes.
so this is the two aspect.
It's interface between language and society. Yes.
Yeah, 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 correct. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank
Aloysius.
you.
I think you
Thank
can
you.
share. I can. I will get your email from Dr.
Yeah.
Frank
Sure. Sure.
also.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
I'll send the article from my supervisor in English, which is published in the
Yes. Sure. I'll
Scopus
get
journal,
it. I'll get it.
Indian
Yes.
Identity in Malaysia.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Vanakkam.
Yeah, vanakkam.
Vanakkam.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable presentation in fixity and fluidity in identity and making us analyze about our own identity as well as showing us portraits from literature about identity. Thank you very much, sir. We are
Thank
very
you.
pleased to
Thank
have
you.
you among us.